So we try to make sure that everything we do is always accretive. So we will acquire as much Bitcoin as we can, as long as market conditions allow us to do it in a creative way for our common stock shareholders.
From a fighter jet pilot to the biggest Bitcoin holder in the world, meet Michael Saylor, the man who bet his entire company and whole life on Bitcoin. Even though he had no money and was considered crazy, Saylor remained committed to his investment. Over time, his actions came to be known as the trade of the century. However, there is also a dark side to this story, where Bitcoin doesn't play a significant role as we might think. So, what's the mysterious story behind Michael Saylor? How did he manage to turn a small company with almost no value into the biggest corporate holder of Bitcoin? And why does he advise everyone to own at least 0.1 Bitcoin? Michael Saylor was born to a military family on February 4, 1965 in Nebraska. As a child, he always admired the US Air Force due to his father being a Chief Master Sergeant. Saylor spent his entire childhood living on various US Air Force bases. Later on, he graduated from technology school with a vision of becoming a fighter jet pilot, just like his father. However, there was something he couldn't have counted on: his medical condition. He was diagnosed with a benign heart murmur, which completely disqualified him from flying jets. Many people would have given up, but Saylor didn't. He decided to move on and find passion in something completely different. Little did he know that soon he would own one of the largest software companies in the world. It didn't take long until he combined his passions for technology and business. At the age of 24, he launched his software company, Microstrategy. The company began by developing software for data mining, later focusing on software for business intelligence. To this day, no one really knows what they actually do.
Michael Saylor is president and CEO of Microstrategy. He founded the startup in 1989 at the age of 24. Since then, the company's focus has evolved from consulting to software to e-business. Today, it is best known for helping large companies sift through their vast databases for valuable analysis and information. It has doubled in size every year and grown into a multi-million-dollar company. From the beginning, it has been driven by the vision of its leader, whose mission has been nothing less than to purge ignorance from the planet.
Saylor took his company public in 1998 with an initial stock offering of 4 million shares, priced at $12 each. To his amazement, the stock price doubled on the first trading day. Just 2 years later, this success led him to a net worth of $7 billion, making him the wealthiest man in the Washington DC area. But only a few days later, the US Securities and SEC charged Michael Saylor and other two MicroStrategy executives with providing inaccurate financial information for the previous 2 years. Although Saylor didn't admit to any wrongdoing, he decided to pay a penalty of $350,000 and also returned $8 million. As a result, MicroStrategy's stock price dropped, causing Saylor's net worth to decrease by $6 billion. And from the initial $7 billion he originally had, it wasn't an easy thing. Despite these challenges, Saylor continued to lead MicroStrategy as its CEO. After that, he started living a quiet life, or at least as quiet as a billionaire's life can be. He returned to public awareness just when the COVID-19 pandemic started. Michael Saylor publicly criticized social distancing and economic shutdowns, calling them soul-stealing. At that time, he had no idea that this pandemic would actually change his life.
We had the money. We are very conservative, no debt, ready for a rainy day, ready to seize the opportunity, buying our stock back. COVID hits, the pandemic hits, everybody's, our equity's in the tank, we're losing momentum. And the first thing that happens in Q1 is it's all kind of shock and awe.
Initially, Saylor was focused on running MicroStrategy and wasn't interested in Bitcoin at all. However, the pandemic forced him to stay home, giving him plenty of time for other things. During this period, he had a discussion about Bitcoin with his very good friend, Eric Weiss, who was actually the CEO of Blockchain Investment Group at that time. This conversation opened Michael Saylor to the idea of Bitcoin, and he began looking more into it. During the peak of the pandemic lockdowns, the economic situation made Saylor more and more interested in Bitcoin. Governments around the world were printing more money, which raised concerns about inflation. As an experienced businessman, Saylor started looking for investment options that could protect him against the decreasing value of money, and Bitcoin seemed like a good choice for this purpose. His interest quickly turned into an obsession, and he became convinced that Bitcoin could change how we think about and use money. Saylor described the Bitcoin as the ultimate store of value and the hardest money ever invented, and compared it to a digital version of gold. He also appreciated Bitcoin's decentralized nature, which allows it to function outside traditional financial systems. In 2020, Saylor shocked the financial world by announcing on TV his plans to buy large amounts of Bitcoin. Later that year in August, Michael Saylor, together with Microstrategy, made a bold move by purchasing over 21,000 bitcoins or $250 million. This made Microstrategy the first publicly traded company to buy Bitcoin. It didn't take long before they made another purchase. In less than a year from the initial investment, the company had invested approximately $2.2 billion and owned almost 100,000 bitcoins. As Bitcoin's price increased, Saylor continued to buy more. By the end of 2021, MicroStrategy had invested over $3.5 billion in Bitcoin, becoming one of the largest corporate holders of cryptocurrency. What's more, there was no special strategy for making these Bitcoin orders. Saylor used a basic dollar-cost averaging approach, which involves buying Bitcoin regularly over time without focusing on the price. Saylor's decision to invest heavily in Bitcoin received mixed reactions. Supporters admired his innovative approach, while critics worried about the risk of investing a large portion of the company's assets in such a volatile asset, especially the shareholders, if there were any, still for the original purpose and not for Bitcoin itself. MicroStrategy basically transformed into something like a Bitcoin ETF long before a real ETF was approved. People who wanted to buy Bitcoin could simply buy shares of MicroStrategy as its stock price was closely connected to the Bitcoin.
So it turned out that it worked out really well for us as a company, but also it created a compelling opportunity for all of our investors, and it made us unique in the public company sphere. So yeah, been a big success.
Michael Saylor was confident in his belief and didn't care about the market pressures or fear of crisis. He consistently expressed his long-term vision and promoted Bitcoin with some crazy statements, such as, "Bitcoin days are numbered. It seems like just a matter of time before it suffers the same fate as online gambling." George Washington woke up at 2 a.m. on December 14, 1799 with a sore throat. After a series of medical procedures, including the draining of nearly 40% of his blood, he died that evening. We have drained nearly 40% of the energy from our currency in 2 years. #Bitcoin. And also some funny ones.
Scientists were able to mimic Nessie Amun's voice by recreating his mouth and vocal cords with a 3D printer. It allowed them to produce a single sound.
Saylor once famously said, "The magic of Bitcoin isn't the transfer of money to someone 10,000 miles away. It is the transfer of money to someone 10,000 days away." Those messages made him an icon in the Bitcoin world, even though sometimes it was little too much. When Bitcoin's price dropped and critics questioned his approach, Saylor remained convinced of Bitcoin's potential as a valuable asset and protection against inflation. He found this price dip to be just opportunities to accumulate more Bitcoin. However, there is still one mystery that remains unsolved. MicroStrategy was buying Bitcoin as if they had millions of dollars, even though they didn't. So, where did they get so much money to buy it? Well, that's also the reason why it was named the trade of the century. This money was borrowed. Firstly, Saylor and MicroStrategy borrowed money at very low interest rates, often less than 1%. This means they paid very little extra on top of the amount they borrowed. Then, the borrowed money was used to purchase Bitcoin. Saylor believed that Bitcoin would be worth much more in the future, so he wanted the company to hold a large amount of it as an investment. The loans they took were non-callable, which means that lenders couldn't demand early repayment. This gave the company stability, as they knew exactly when they needed to repay the money. And here comes the best part. Instead of paying back the loans with cash, MicroStrategy could repay them with shares of its own stock. This approach was very beneficial for lenders because they received shares that could be worth much more in the future than the initial loan amount. And they were right. This allowed MicroStrategy to invest heavily in Bitcoin while managing its financial risk effectively. And here is the exciting exciting part. They still haven't stopped doing it. Whether the price is low or high, they simply don't care. Maybe they are all fools, but it's clearly paying off. The largest Bitcoin purchase they ever made was when Bitcoin reached its all-time high, resulting in almost $1 billion spent on this investment. However, even though Michael Saylor might seem like a smart and successful man without any problems, there is also the dark side of his story. Once in an interview, Michael Saylor said that his company was in a situation where they had some cash on hand, but he realized they didn't have a chance of competing in the near future with other tech companies. The only way forward was to acquire another company. However, he was getting desperate to find a company to buy and wasn't finding anything worthwhile. He said that his breakthrough was realizing that just putting all the money into one cryptocurrency had a much better chance of success than trying to pick a winning company. At the time, Bitcoin was the only choice, so that's what he did. Some people started criticizing him afterwards, mostly for the way he was telling others to buy Bitcoin. Could Michael Saylor be just trying to pump his investment and not actually believe in Bitcoin? Has he fooled everyone, or is his belief genuinely true? In any case, Michael Saylor wasn't satisfied at this point, so he decided to take a very important step in his career. On August 8, 2022, Saylor resigned as CEO and remained executive chairman of Microstrategy. He did so he could focus more on their Bitcoin acquisition strategy. What else, right? Saylor now attends many conferences around the world where he is often the main guest promoting Bitcoin.
Every one of you knows someone. Go tell a CEO, go tell your father, go tell your mother, go tell somebody that Bitcoin's going to change the world and they should figure out more about it. Because the number one thing you can do is educate the world on Bitcoin and let people know they need to figure out Bitcoin. And every one of you does make a difference, because I would never get those meetings if it wasn't like someone that went and said, you got to pay attention. And my last point to you, you do not sell your Bitcoin. Thank you.
Although Saylor doesn't believe that Bitcoin is truly in danger, he admits that there are a few significant concerns: being banned, copied, or hacked. Even though these issues might seem like a potential threat to Bitcoin's future, he managed to disprove all three in a minute.
So when I got to my skeptical phase, I just asked, will it be banned? Will it be copied? Will it be hacked? And I stared at it, and the conclusion was, it's only if it's understood to be property, not currency, then no, it's not going to be banned in a country that gives you property rights, which means it's banned in Cuba, it's banned in North Korea. If the world becomes communist and they deprive you of the ability to own things, that's an existential risk. But that's not a problem in Russia or China or the US right now. So not banned. Will it be copied? It was copied 10,000 times, they all failed. This is the winner of the 10,000 experiments. It worked. And now, will it be hacked? And Satoshi's got 50, 60 billion dollars in a wallet out there, then that's the reward for hacking it, and no one's figured out how to get the money yet. So it hasn't been hacked, and I know it's able to store 60 billion without anybody hitting it.
Once, he made headlines with his advice that everyone should own at least 0.1 Bitcoin. Why? Saylor believes that Bitcoin is a hedge against inflation, as its supply is kept at 21 million coins, making it a deflationary asset. Something very similar to gold, but unlike gold, Bitcoin is more practical, and there is no risk of discovering a new Bitcoin mine full of Bitcoins in the future. According to him, 0.1 Bitcoin is a relatively small amount compared to the total supply of Bitcoin, making it very accessible for most people. Owning this amount now could mean significant gains later, he added on top of that. Many people are now admiring Michael Saylor, with some even predicting that he could soon become the richest person on the planet. These predictions are mostly coming from Bitcoiners who believe that Bitcoin will continue to grow over time. What makes this even more interesting is that Microstrategy could soon be included in the S&P 500 index. Given Saylor's strong conviction in Bitcoin, this inclusion would mean that anyone investing in the S&P 500 fund would, in effect, also be investing in Bitcoin. This could play a significant role in determining whether Michael Saylor eventually becomes the richest person on the planet or not. If you like this video, I would be very happy if you could like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. We are slowly approaching 200 subs, and it would be my big dream to reach it. If you didn't like it, please write at least a comment on what should I improve.